We've all been asking the same question individually and as a community. What will it take for us to reopen? George had a chance to ask that question of Dr. Brian McDonough, the chief medical contributor for CBS Radio. George?
Yeah, and Katie, Dr. McDonough is adamant that there's a right way to do this and a wrong way. He says we need data, testing, to truly find out how widespread exposure to this virus is before we can just open things up completely. He says to open without data would be a recipe for a dramatic spike in the illness. He doesn't think Minnesota should do what Florida did last week. Eventually, Rochester is going to reopen. In an ideal world, though, that won't happen until there is a confirmed measure of what doctors call herd immunity to COVID-19, or even better, a vaccine. No such confirmed protections were in place last week when Florida began reopening its beaches. Dr. Brian McDonough says that could be a recipe for disaster.
All you need is 5 or 10 people with the virus intermixing with people who don't have it, and that virus is going to go from person to person to person, and then they then will carry it, and it'll go to the next person, and that's how you start getting these problems. So, you know, the Florida experience is how you don't open the country. I mean, you want a definition of the way not to do it, look at what Florida did with the beaches. That's a big mistake, and I hope it doesn't have long-term problems, and we won't know for 14 days.
Dr. McDonough is hopeful we will gradually build up the aforementioned herd immunity. That's when so many people in a community become immune to a disease that it prevents the spread of the illness. Which brings us now back to testing. A study in Iceland concluded that roughly 50% of the population there has been exposed to the virus. That is the sort of number that approaches herd immunity. Right now, though, we haven't got any significant data on how many of us have been exposed. And Katie, that is the really valuable information.
Yeah, it really is. Thanks, George. Dr. McDonough is doing a podcast as a public service called Coronavirus Today. It's available on Spotify and other podcast locations. We're going to put all the information on KIMT.com for you. Well, Rochester